Thursday morning started like any other. Alarm blaring at 6:30 a.m., kids grumbling their way to breakfast, and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the kitchen. I was in the middle of this routine chaos when my phone pinged with an email notification. At first, I ignored it, assuming it was just another work update. But something about it tugged at me. Maybe it was the cryptic subject line, "For your eyes only." I tapped on the notification, and the message loaded slowly, as though it understood my rising anxiety. The sender's name was an odd jumble of letters and numbers. Definitely anonymous. My heart sank further when I opened the email to find no text, just an attachment labeled important photos.zip. Normally, I'd delete something so suspicious, but something about it gnawed at me. Curiosity or dread, I couldn't tell. Against my better judgment, I downloaded it. My palms were sweaty as I clicked open the folder. But instead of photos, the folder contained a series of documents, receipts, schedules, and a time-stamped list of locations. I didn't immediately understand what I was looking at, but the repetitive presence of one name sent chills down my spine. The Westlake Inn. Confused, I glanced at the clock. I had just enough time to drop the kids at school and take a detour. Whatever this was, I needed to see it for myself. The Westlake Inn sat on the edge of town, an unassuming motel with peeling paint and a gravel parking lot. As I pulled in, the sheer ordinariness of the place only added to my unease. What could possibly tie my life to this rundown spot? The time-stamped locations matched the check-in counter. A woman with kind eyes greeted me as I approached. "Hi there. Do you need a room? Or?" I hesitated, fumbling with my phone. "Actually, I think I left something here a few days ago. Mind if I check?" She frowned but nodded. "Sure, if you can tell me the date. We keep logs of lost and found items." I mentioned the date from the receipts. She retrieved a ledger and flipped through pages before looking up with wide eyes. "You're not Claire, are you?" "No, I'm her husband," I blurted out before I could stop myself. My heart raced. "Claire? My Claire?" Her expression softened. "I see. Well, we haven't found anything of hers, but she's been here a few times. Is there something specific you're looking for?" It took every ounce of composure to thank her and leave without making a scene. I sat in the car for a long time, staring at the crumpled printout in my hand. Claire, my wife of 12 years, had been coming to this dingy motel. Why? I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe she was meeting a client off-site. But the nagging voice in my head was impossible to ignore. It whispered that something wasn't right. When I got home, Claire was her usual self, bright-eyed, cheerful, and completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. As we chatted about the kids' school projects over dinner, I couldn't help but wonder if I was imagining it all. Could the woman sitting across from me, the one I'd built a life with, have secrets I couldn't begin to fathom? That night, I lay awake, replaying the day's events in my head. I decided not to confront her. Not yet. I needed more. If there was one thing I'd learned from years of marriage, it was that trust was fragile. And tonight, for the first time, I realized just how precariously ours hung in the balance. The next morning, Claire left early. She kissed me on the cheek, told me not to let the kids eat too much cereal, and hurried out the door. I watched her car disappear down the street, her usual scent of vanilla perfume lingering in the air. Everything seemed normal, but normal felt like a mask now. After getting the kids ready and off to school, I returned to the email. This time, I examined every document more carefully. The receipts were all from the same motel, spanning the past 6 weeks. Same room number every time. Room 214. My stomach churned. The timestamps lined up with Claire's work dinners and late meetings. A sense of unease settled in. Could it be a coincidence? Was I jumping to conclusions? I needed clarity. I found myself dialing the number for the Westlake Inn. Westlake Inn, this is Lisa speaking. How can I help you? Hi, Lisa, I said, keeping my voice steady. I was wondering if I could ask about a guest. Claire Dawson. She stayed in room 214 a few times recently. I think she might have left something behind. There was a pause on the other end. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't disclose guest information." I expected that response, but I pressed on. "I understand. It's just, my wife thought she might have lost her necklace there. It has sentimental value." Another pause, this one longer. "Your wife?" she asked, her tone shifting slightly. "Yes, Claire Dawson," I repeated, my voice growing firmer. Her sigh was audible. "I shouldn't be saying this, but she wasn't here alone." I froze. "Excuse me? I really can't say more," she added quickly, her tone regretful now. "I'm sorry. I've already said too much." The line went dead, leaving me gripping my phone in stunned silence. Claire wasn't alone. I paced the living room, my mind racing. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe it was work-related. Maybe she was meeting a client or hosting a group. But who was I kidding? The unease I'd been trying to suppress bubbled up into anger. The Claire I knew wouldn't lie to me. But then again, how well did I even know her anymore? I took a deep breath and forced myself to focus. Losing my temper wouldn't get me answers. I needed to stay calm and strategic. If she wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up a search engine. How to track a phone without them knowing. The top results gave me a mix of apps and devices. Some required physical access to her phone, others didn't. I ordered a small GPS tracker to slip into her car and downloaded a monitoring app for her phone. I hated that it had come to this, but I needed proof one way or another. That afternoon, Claire came home earlier than usual. She was cheerful, chatting about her boss's upcoming birthday and how she was helping plan a surprise party for him. "You've been busy," I said, forcing a smile. "You have no idea," she laughed, pouring herself a glass of wine. "Between work and the kids, I feel like I'm running on fumes." I studied her closely. She didn't look like someone weighed down by guilt. She looked relaxed, even happy. As she talked, my gaze wandered to her phone on the counter. It was unlocked. This was my chance. "Claire, can you grab me a glass too?" I asked casually, nodding toward the cabinet. She set her phone down and turned to grab another glass. In those few seconds, I slid it toward me, tapping quickly through her apps. No suspicious texts, no unfamiliar names in her contacts. But then I opened her calendar and saw something that made my heart race. Thursday, 7 p.m., dinner with Jay. I'd seen this Jay pop up before, always during her supposed late-night meetings. I slipped her phone back just as she turned around, glass in hand. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. That evening, I installed the tracker under her car's dashboard while she showered. Tomorrow, I'd know exactly where she went. If there was nothing to hide, I'd feel like a paranoid fool. But if my instincts were right, I'd finally get the truth. As I lay in bed that night, Claire asleep beside me, my mind kept returning to the name. Who the hell was Jay? Friday started uneventfully. Claire left the house early again, kissing me on the cheek as she hurried out the door. "Big day at the office," she said, with that same easy smile I'd fallen for years ago. I smiled back, though my stomach twisted. The GPS tracker was in place, the app already installed on my phone. All I had to do was wait. I kept busy that morning, running errands and cleaning up around the house. Anything to keep my mind off the tracker notifications. But when her car pinged at a location just a few blocks from the Westlake Inn, my heart skipped a beat. The tracker showed her stopping there briefly, no more than 15 minutes, before heading to her office downtown. I tried to convince myself it could be innocent. Maybe she stopped for coffee nearby, or maybe it was just a coincidence. But my gut told me otherwise. By 6:30 p.m., the tracker pinged again. This time, her car wasn't heading home. It was moving toward a part of town we rarely visited. I waited, watching the little dot on the screen as it came to a stop at a fancy steakhouse. The same steakhouse where we'd celebrated our anniversary last year. I told the kids I'd be back soon and hopped into my car. The GPS app guided me straight there, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted her car parked toward the back. I scanned the lot for a few seconds and spotted Claire stepping out, dressed in the same black dress she'd worn on our last date night. She adjusted her hair, looking around nervously before walking toward the entrance. My pulse thundered in my ears. Who was she meeting? I stayed in my car, watching as she entered the restaurant. Part of me wanted to storm inside and demand answers, but I knew I had to be smart. I needed to see who she was meeting before I confronted her. Minutes later, a man appeared. Tall, clean-shaven, and dressed in an expensive suit. He strolled confidently into the restaurant. My heart sank as I recognized him. Jacob, her coworker. Claire had mentioned him in passing before. Her team lead, the one she worked closely with on those late meetings. I'd brushed it off at the time, but now, as I watched him disappear into the restaurant, everything clicked. I clenched the steering wheel, fighting the urge to march inside. But I knew I needed more than a vague suspicion. I needed concrete proof. I grabbed my phone and searched for nearby private investigators. A name popped up, Harris Investigations. I'd heard of them before, a discreet and efficient PI firm. Without hesitating, I called the number. "Hello, Harris Investigations," a woman answered. "I need your help," I said, my voice tight. "It's urgent." An hour later, I was sitting in a dimly lit office with a man named Eric Harris. He was sharp, calm, and professional. After I explained the situation, he leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You've got a gut feeling, and you're seeing signs," he said. "But you're smart to want hard evidence before acting." I nodded, grateful that he wasn't judging me. "Can you help me?" He smiled faintly. "That's what I do. I'll follow her and this Jacob, document everything, and let you know exactly what's going on." I handed over the details, her license plate, Jacob's name, and her schedule. Eric assured me he'd start immediately. Driving home, my thoughts were a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, fear, but also a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe there was still an innocent explanation. Maybe I was wrong. That night, Claire came home around 10. Her cheeks flushed from an exhausting work dinner. She kissed me softly, her eyes tired but warm. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "The longest," she said, sighing. "But we made good progress on the campaign." I nodded, watching her carefully.
I'm glad.
She smiled and headed upstairs to shower, leaving me alone with my thoughts. Soon I'd have answers. Whatever they were, I wasn't sure I was ready for them. But I couldn't stop now. Saturday morning, Claire was bright and cheerful, cooking pancakes in the kitchen while humming a tune. The kids darted around, laughing as she flipped the golden discs onto their plates. She glanced at me and smiled. "Morning, sleepyhead. Coffee's ready," she said. I muttered a thanks, pouring myself a cup. I couldn't focus on the mundane warmth of our family moment. My mind was spinning with what Eric Harris might have uncovered. By late morning, I had an email from Harris Investigations. The subject line read, "Preliminary Report, Claire Dawson." I opened it in the garage, away from prying eyes. My breath caught as I scanned the contents. Claire and Jacob had indeed dined together at the steakhouse. Harris had attached photos. The two of them at a small table, leaning in close, their conversation animated. Jacob smiled as he poured her wine. Claire laughed, her hand brushing his arm. It looked intimate but not necessarily damning. The report continued. After dinner, Jacob had walked Claire to her car, and they stood talking for several minutes. Then, to my relief, she got into her car and drove home. There had been no kiss, no lingering embrace. I should have felt reassured, but instead, the report left me feeling hollow. Why hadn't she mentioned meeting Jacob? If it were innocent, why keep it a secret? I replied to Eric, asking him to keep digging. Something didn't feel right. That evening, Claire told me she was going out again. This time, for drinks with the girls. I played it cool, asking which bar they were heading to. "Oh, just the usual spot downtown," she said, avoiding eye contact as she adjusted her earrings in the mirror. I watched her closely. The dress she wore wasn't what I'd expect for a casual night with friends. It hugged her figure, the kind of outfit she used to wear for our date nights. "Have fun," I said, keeping my voice light. Text me when you get there. She nodded and kissed me goodbye. Minutes later, the GPS tracker pinged. She wasn't heading downtown. Instead, her car veered toward the outskirts of the city. My heart pounded as I grabbed my keys and followed at a distance. The dot on my phone stopped at a small boutique hotel, the Camden Arms. I parked a block away, my hands trembling on the wheel. What the hell was she doing here? I watched from the shadows as she stepped out of her car and walked briskly toward the entrance. My gut churned as a familiar figure appeared from the hotel lobby. Jacob. They exchanged quick words, then disappeared inside together. I waited for what felt like hours watching the entrance. Nobody came in or out. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this some work meeting? Or was it what I feared most? When I couldn't take it anymore, I called Eric. There at the Camden Arms, I said, my voice shaking. What do I do? Nothing, he replied firmly. I'll send someone right now. Stay put and don't confront her yet. I waited in my car, my nerves fraying with every passing minute. Just as I was about to lose my mind, Eric texted. We're on site. I'll call you in the morning with details. Go home. Go home? How was I supposed to go home, knowing Claire was here with Jacob? But Eric was right. If I barged in, I might blow everything. I started the car and drove back, my chest tight, my thoughts dark. When Claire returned home around midnight, she smelled faintly of wine and perfume. She slipped into bed beside me, her movements careful, almost guilty. Did you have fun? I asked, my voice low. She murmured sleepily. The girls were hilarious tonight. You should have seen Lisa after her second martini. The lie burned in my ears, but I didn't let it show. As Claire drifted off to sleep, I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched under the blanket. Tomorrow I'd have answers, and then, I wasn't sure what I'd do. But I knew one thing. This charade couldn't last much longer. Sunday morning arrived, and my phone buzzed before the sun was fully up. I scrambled out of bed to avoid waking Claire, stepping into the hallway as I answered. Eric, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. We've got something, he replied. Meet me at the office in an hour. You'll want to see this in person. The weight of those words made my chest tighten. I'll be there. I brewed coffee, forcing myself to act normal as Claire stumbled into the kitchen. She yawned, her hair messy, her face free of the usual guilt I expected to see. Morning, she said, stretching. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I replied. Figured I'd catch up on some work. She nodded, her attention shifting to the coffee maker. I excused myself, grabbed my keys and headed out, my pulse quickening with every step. Eric's office was tucked into a nondescript building downtown. When I arrived, he greeted me with a firm handshake and led me to a small room where a series of photos and documents were laid out on the table. Let's cut to the chase, Eric said, motioning for me to sit. We followed your wife last night. My eyes scanned the table, and the first photo made my stomach lurch. Claire and Jacob, sitting in the hotel lounge, drinks in hand, their heads close together. That's from when they first arrived, Eric explained. Nothing too out of the ordinary yet. But then, he slid another photo across the table. Claire and Jacob were entering an elevator together, his hand on the small of her back. My throat tightened. Did they go to a room? Eric nodded grimly, pulling up a time-stamped log on his laptop. Room 312. They were there for about 2 hours. No one else went in or out. The world seemed to tilt under me. My hands curled into fists as I tried to process what I was seeing. We don't have video inside the room, obviously, Eric continued. But based on the patterns we've seen, this isn't their first time meeting like this. My mind flashed back to her work dinners, late nights, and the meticulous effort she'd been putting into her appearance lately. All the signs were there, and now I couldn't deny them any longer. What about after? I asked, my voice shaking. She left first, Eric said, showing me another photo of Claire exiting the hotel. He followed about 10 minutes later. They didn't leave together, likely to avoid suspicion. I leaned back in the chair, my head spinning. So it's real. She's having an affair. Eric's face softened slightly.
I'm sorry.
I know this isn't easy, but now that you have this information, you need to decide what you want to do next. Driving home, my emotions were a storm. Anger, betrayal, disbelief. They all swirled together, making it hard to think straight. When I pulled into the driveway, Claire's car was gone. A text on my phone confirmed she'd taken the kids to the park. I walked into the empty house, feeling like a stranger in my own home. I sat at the dining room table, staring at one of the photos Eric had emailed me. Claire looked happy in it, laughing at something Jacob had said, her eyes sparkling in a way I hadn't seen in years. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she look so carefree while destroying everything we'd built? But beneath the anger was a deeper question. Why? Why risk our marriage, our family, for him? Was it something I'd done or hadn't done? Was I blind to her unhappiness? I didn't have those answers yet, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let this go unanswered. That evening, when Claire came home, I played my part perfectly. I smiled, joked with the kids, and even helped her prep for dinner. But inside, I was unraveling. "Work this week is going to be crazy," she said, setting plates on the table. "We've got a big pitch coming up, so I might be late a couple of nights." Her lies stung more now that I knew the truth. "Take it easy on yourself," I replied, forcing a smile. "You've been working so hard lately." She laughed softly. "Someone's got to keep things running around here." After dinner, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I took a deep breath. I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I had more.
Tomorrow, I dig deeper.
I'd learn everything. And when the time came, I'd make sure she knew exactly what she'd done to us. Monday came, and with it a renewed sense of determination. I spent the morning methodically going through the evidence Eric had sent me. Every photo and every timestamp like a punch to the gut. My emotions were a mess, but I forced myself to focus. Claire had left for work in her usual cheerful manner, dressed impeccably, and with her signature vanilla perfume lingering in the air. But now, every little detail, her smile, her words, her touch, felt like a cruel performance. I needed more. By mid-morning, I was at Eric's office again, pacing as he went over his findings. "There's something else you should see," he said, pulling up a video on his laptop. It was grainy footage from the hotel's security cameras. Claire and Jacob were in the parking lot, talking near her car. She was laughing at something he said, her hand lightly touching his arm. Then, without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a quick, hesitant kiss. It was passionate, deliberate. She didn't pull away. The room spun as I stared at the screen. This was it. The undeniable proof I'd hoped I wouldn't find. "They're comfortable with each other," Eric said, his tone careful. "This isn't a fling. It's been going on for a while." My stomach churned. "How long do you think?" "I'd guess months, based on the patterns we've observed," he replied. Months. The word echoed in my head, a heavy weight settling on my chest. That afternoon, I decided to dig into Claire's phone. The monitoring app I'd installed gave me access to her text messages, emails, and even her location history. I felt guilty snooping, but the guilt was drowned out by the need for answers. Sure enough, the texts between Claire and Jacob were there. "Jacob, can't stop thinking about last night. You're incredible." "Claire, you're not so bad yourself, winking face. I'm counting the hours until Thursday." Thursday. That was 2 days away. I clenched my fists, reading further. Their messages were a mixture of work talk and flirtation, peppered with hints of their clandestine meetings. It wasn't just about lust, it was emotional, too. They shared jokes, talked about their days, even vented to each other about stress at work. I hated how easily they connected. Later, when Claire came home, I struggled to look at her. She kissed me on the cheek, her smile warm and genuine, or at least it seemed that way. "How was your day?" she asked, setting her bag on the counter. "Busy," I replied, keeping my tone even. "Yours?" "Same," she said, rolling her eyes playfully. Jacob's being his usual perfectionist self. I swear he's never happy with anything. The mention of his name hit me like a slap. I nodded, forcing a chuckle. Sounds exhausting. You have no idea, she said, grabbing a glass of water. I'm just glad to be home. Her lies were so effortless, so smooth. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her. That night, after she fell asleep, I stayed up late combing through her phone data again. Something caught my eye. A series of payments from her personal account to a high-end jewelry store. The most recent payment had been made just last week. $1,500. What had she bought? It wasn't for me. I searched for the store online and called them first thing in the morning. Hi, I said, keeping my voice steady. My wife recently made a purchase from your store, but I believe there's been a mix-up with the receipt. Can you help me check? The woman on the other end was polite and helpful. After confirming some details, she pulled up the record. Yes, it was a custom bracelet, she said, engraved with the initials C and J. My breath caught.
CJ.
I repeated, my voice trembling. Yes, she said. It's quite lovely, gold with diamond accents. Would you like to see the design? No, thank you, I said quickly, hanging up. I sat there, the weight of the truth crushing me. She wasn't just cheating. She was building something with him, something personal and intimate. This wasn't just a fling. As I drove home, my thoughts were a tangled mess. I couldn't pretend anymore. Confrontation was inevitable, but I needed the perfect moment, the perfect plan. Claire had taken something from me. Trust, loyalty, the life we'd built together, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. Thursday was coming fast. I had to be ready. Thursday loomed like a storm on the horizon, but I didn't flinch. If Claire and Jacob were planning another rendezvous, I'd be ready. I'd spent the past 2 days in a state of icy focus, collecting every piece of evidence and rehearsing my next steps. I wasn't going to confront her blindly. I needed to hit her with the full weight of the truth and ensure there was no way for her to wriggle out. That morning, Claire breezed through the house with her usual charm. She wore a navy blue dress, professional yet alluring, her makeup flawless. She kissed me lightly on the cheek before heading out the door. Late meeting tonight, she said casually. Don't wait up. Her words dripped with irony, but I kept my expression neutral. No problem, I replied, my tone even. See you when you're back. She smiled, completely unaware of what was coming. By 6 p.m., I was parked outside the same boutique hotel, the Camden Arms. Eric and his team were already in place, ready to document every moment. The plan was simple. Let her walk into the trap, gather concrete evidence, and then confront her in a way she'd never forget. At exactly 6:37 p.m., Claire's car pulled into the lot. My chest tightened as I watched her step out, her heels clicking on the pavement. She paused to check her reflection in the car window before walking toward the entrance. Not long after, Jacob arrived, his car sliding into a spot 2 spaces down from hers. He looked every bit the polished professional, his suit crisp, his demeanor confident. They didn't enter the hotel together, but it didn't matter. I knew exactly where they were going. Inside, Eric's team discreetly captured everything. Claire meeting Jacob in the lounge, their cozy conversation, and the inevitable elevator ride to room 312. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I wanted to burst in, to confront them both right there and then, but I had to stay patient. I had to stick to the plan. After 2 hours, Claire emerged first. She looked calm, composed, as if nothing had happened. Jacob followed shortly after, keeping a safe distance as he walked to his car. It was time. When Claire arrived home later that night, I was waiting in the living room. I'd left the lights dim, the atmosphere heavy with tension. She walked in, kicking off her heels, her expression lighting up when she saw me. You're still up, she said, setting her bag on the counter. Thought you'd be in bed by now. I couldn't sleep, I replied, my voice cold. She hesitated, her smile faltering slightly. Everything okay? I stood, crossing the room slowly, a man with nothing left to lose. "You tell me, Claire," I said, holding up my phone. On the screen was one of Eric's photos, her and Jacob outside the hotel, his hand on her back. Her face paled instantly. What is this?" "It's proof," I said, my voice rising. "Proof that while I've been here, holding our family together, you've been off screwing your coworker." She stepped back, her hands trembling. "Wait, Jack. This isn't what it looks like. Don't lie to me," I shouted, the anger boiling over. "I have photos, videos, text messages. I know everything, Claire. Everything." She sank onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "Didn't mean for what to happen?" I snapped. "The dinners? The hotel rooms? The bracelet with his initials?" Her head shot up at that, her eyes wide with shock. You went through my things?" "Damn right I did," I said, the venom in my voice unrelenting. "You've been lying to me for months, Claire. Did you think I wouldn't figure it out?" Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no pity. "You don't understand," she sobbed. "Then make me understand," I yelled. But she didn't. She just sat there, shaking, her betrayal laid bare. That night, I slept in the guest room, the door locked behind me. Claire tried to talk, to explain, but I couldn't bear to hear her voice. The confrontation was just the beginning. The fallout was coming, and it was going to change everything. Tomorrow I'd make sure of it. The morning after the confrontation was eerily silent. I woke up in the guest room, the air thick with the tension of a marriage dangling by a thread. Claire was already awake, sitting at the dining table with a cup of coffee in her hands, staring into nothingness. She looked up when I entered the room, her eyes swollen from crying. "Jack," she began, her voice shaky. I raised a hand, cutting her off. "Not now. I have things to do." I grabbed my keys and left before she could say another word. I drove aimlessly for a while, trying to sort through the whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and sadness all fought for dominance. But one question lingered above the rest. Why? Why had she done this? Why wasn't I enough? I parked at a cafe, ordered a coffee, and sat by the window. I needed a plan. Something that went beyond the heat of last night's confrontation. I wasn't going to let Claire's betrayal ruin me or my family. Pulling out my phone, I called Eric Harris. "Eric, it's Jack," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I need you to gather everything, financial records, social media activity, anything that ties Jacob to Claire. I want it all." "You've got it," Eric replied without hesitation. By the time I returned home, Claire was still at the dining table, now joined by her phone and a barely touched breakfast. She looked up as I walked in, her face a mix of guilt and hope. "Jack, please," she said softly. "We need to talk." I sighed, sitting across from her. "Fine. Talk." She fidgeted with her mug, her hands trembling. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I was lonely, Jack. You've been so distant these past few years. I felt invisible." "Invisible," I repeated, my voice low but cutting. "You felt invisible, so you decided to screw Jacob? That's your excuse." "It wasn't like that," she said quickly. "It started as work. We were spending long hours together and, I don't know, he listened to me. He made me feel important." I finished for her, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "More important than your husband? Your kids? Our life?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Her silence was deafening. "That's all I needed to know," I said, standing abruptly. "Wait!" she cried, grabbing my arm. "Jack, I love you. I love our family. I don't want to lose you." "Funny way of showing it," I said, yanking my arm free. I walked away, retreating to my office. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. Claire avoided me, retreating to our bedroom while I buried myself in work. That evening, Eric called. "Jack, I've got something," he said. "Jacob's been reckless. I've tracked financial transactions between him and your wife Dinners, hotel rooms, gifts. It's all documented. My jaw tightened. Good. Send it all to me. There's more, Eric continued. Jacob's married. His wife doesn't seem to know. Yet. The revelation hit me like a freight train. Jacob wasn't just betraying me, he was betraying someone else too. Get me her contact information, I said. It's time she knew the truth. The next morning, I sent an email to Jacob's wife, Lauren. I included the photos, the receipts, and everything Eric had uncovered. I didn't write much, just a short, brutal note. You deserve to know what your husband has been doing.
I'm sorry.
Within minutes, my phone rang. Who is this? A panicked voice demanded. This is Jack Dawson, I said. Your husband has been having an affair with my wife. The silence on the other end was heavy, broken only by a soft, shaky breath. You're sure? I have proof, I said simply. Check your email. After a long pause, she whispered, Thank you. I hung up, feeling a grim sense of satisfaction. By the time Claire came downstairs, she must have sensed the shift in the air. What did you do? She asked, her voice trembling. I told Jacob's wife, I replied coldly. Her face paled. Jack, why? Why? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Because I'm done letting you hide in the shadows, Claire. If you want to destroy our life, you're going to face the consequences. Her tears returned, but this time, I felt nothing. I've contacted a lawyer, I added, my voice firm. We're going to figure out how to move forward for the kids. But us? We're done. Claire collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't stay to watch. I grabbed my jacket and left, the weight of finality settling on my shoulders. The storm had arrived, and there was no turning back now. When I walked out that day, I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed air, space to process the implosion of everything I thought my life was. I ended up at a park near the kids' school, sitting on a bench with my head in my hands. The breeze rustled through the trees, a stark contrast to the chaos inside me. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Hello? Is this Jack? The voice asked, shaky but resolute. This is Jack, I said cautiously. It's Lauren, she replied. Jacob's wife. I sat up straighter, unsure what to expect. Lauren, You were right, she interrupted, her voice breaking. I confronted him. He admitted everything. My stomach twisted. I'm sorry you had to go through that. No, she said firmly. Thank you. If you hadn't told me, I would have kept living in his lies. There was a long pause before she added, What are you going to do now? I've contacted a lawyer, I admitted. I don't see a way back from this. She sighed. Same here. I just wanted you to know you're not alone in this. I thanked her and we hung up. Her words stuck with me. I wasn't alone, but it sure felt like it. When I got home that evening, Claire was sitting at the dining table, her face pale and drawn. Jack, she started, her voice hoarse. We need to talk. We've talked, I said flatly, setting my keys on the counter. I think we're past that now. Please, she begged, standing. Let me explain, really explain. I sighed, gesturing for her to continue. She took a deep breath, tears welling in her eyes. I know I've destroyed everything. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I felt lost, Jack. Like I didn't matter anymore. Her words hit me harder than I expected. You didn't matter? I said, my voice rising. I built this life for us. For you. And the kids. Everything I've done was for this family. I know, she said, sobbing. And I'm so sorry. But somewhere along the way, I felt invisible. Like a ghost in my own life. Her words echoed in my mind, but they didn't absolve her. So, you made yourself feel alive by cheating on me? I said, my voice trembling with anger. With him. She broke down, collapsing onto the chair. I was wrong. I know that. But I love you, Jack. I love our family. Please, Please don't give up on us. That night, I slept in the guest room again, her words swirling in my head. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the life we'd built. But the betrayal was too fresh, too raw. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Janet, who had been preparing the paperwork for a separation. I need to know what you want out of this, Jack, she said, her tone gentle but firm. I want to protect the kids, I replied. They don't deserve to be caught in this mess. She nodded. And what about the house? Assets? I don't care about the house, I said. As long as the kids are taken care of, she can have it. I'll figure out the rest. Janet raised an eyebrow. That's generous, considering the circumstances. I'm not doing this out of spite, I said firmly. I just want to move on. Later that day, Claire and I sat down to tell the kids about the separation. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had. Mom and Dad still love you very much, Claire said, her voice breaking. But we've decided it's best if we live apart for now. Our daughter started crying immediately, while our son just stared at the floor, his face blank. I knelt in front of them, trying to reassure them, but the guilt in their eyes was unbearable. Afterward, Claire retreated upstairs, and I stayed with the kids, watching cartoons they barely paid attention to. As the days passed, I began to set things in motion. I found a small apartment nearby and started moving my things out. Each box packed felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Claire tried to talk to me a few more times, but I kept my distance. I needed space to figure out who I was without her. One night, as I unpacked in my new place, my phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. How are you holding up? I hesitated before replying, one day at a time. Her response came quickly. Same here. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. It was a small comfort knowing someone else understood the pain. But even with that comfort, I couldn't shake the weight of what had been lost. The life I thought I knew was gone, and I was left standing in the wreckage, trying to find my way forward. It's strange how life moves on, even when you feel like yours has stopped. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the raw edges of my anger and pain dulled into something more manageable. It wasn't gone, not entirely, but it no longer consumed me. I focused on what mattered most. The kids. We worked out a custody arrangement where they'd split time between Claire and me. I didn't want them to feel like they were losing their family, even if the dynamic had changed. The first night in my new apartment with the kids was quiet. They were hesitant, their laughter muted, but I tried to make it special. I let them pick dinner, pizza of course, and we watched an old animated movie together. At bedtime, my daughter clung to me, her little arms wrapped tightly around my neck. Are you and Mommy going to be okay? She asked, her voice small. We're always going to be here for you, I said, stroking her hair. No matter what happens, we'll always love you. It was the best I could give her. Meanwhile, Claire was trying to make amends. She called often, trying to explain herself, to apologize, but I kept my distance. I told her I needed time, but the truth was, I didn't know if I'd ever be able to forgive her. One afternoon, she showed up unannounced at my apartment. Jack, she said, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were red, her face drawn. Can I come in? I hesitated before stepping aside. She sat on the couch, wringing her hands. I wanted to tell you that I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did what I did. That's good, I said flatly. I know it doesn't fix anything, she continued. But I don't want you to think I'm giving up on us. On our family. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Claire, I don't know if there's an us to fix. I'm trying to figure out who I am without you. Maybe you should do the same. Her tears spilled over, but she nodded. I'm sorry, Jack, for everything. It wasn't enough, but it was something. A few weeks later, I got a text from Lauren. Coffee sometime? No pressure. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Sure. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. She looked tired but composed, her strength evident in the way she carried herself. Thanks for meeting me, she said, offering a tentative smile. We talked about everything and nothing. Our kids, work, and the strange limbo we found ourselves in. It was comforting, talking to someone who truly understood the mess we'd been dragged into. As the conversation turned lighter, she looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you think you'll ever forgive her?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. "I don't know. I want to for the kids' sake. But forgetting? That's different." She nodded, understanding. "Same here." The days continued to pass, each one a small step forward. I threw myself into work, spent as much time as I could with the kids, and slowly began rebuilding my life. Claire and I were civil, even friendly at times, but the wounds between us were deep. I wasn't sure they'd ever truly heal. One evening, as I sat on the couch with the kids, my son leaned against me, his voice curious. "Do you think we'll all live together again someday?" he asked. I looked at him, my heart aching at his innocence. "I don't know, buddy," I said honestly. "But no matter what, we'll always be a family. That'll never change." He seemed satisfied with that, and I hugged him tightly, the weight of everything feeling a little lighter. It's been a year now. The kids have adjusted, though they still ask questions now and then. I've settled into my new normal, and though it's not the life I imagined, it's a life I'm learning to embrace. Claire and I remain co-parents, our relationship reduced to polite exchanges and updates about the kids. She's still in therapy, still trying to make sense of the choices she made. As for me, I found peace in small moments. Laughter with the kids, a quiet evening with a good book, the occasional coffee with Lauren, who's become an unexpected but steady presence in my life. The betrayal changed me. It broke something that can't be fully repaired. But it also taught me resilience and the value of the people who truly matter. I don't know what the future holds, but for now I'm okay. And sometimes that's enough.